Of course, now we've got an amazing panel to talk about identity Legos, the blocks and building blocks of identity. Danny Zuckerman from 3Box Lab and Ceramic Network, take it away.
Thank you, David, and thanks, Michael, for that framing of identity, which I agree is a great lead-in to this. And also thanks to John and the rest of the ETHDenver team. It's so exciting to be here. This is always such a great event, almost more so this year. It's really impressive what you guys have done virtually. Also really excited for this panel and to hear these 5 panelists. I think they're coming up now. There we go. So I think this is a really appropriate way to close out today's talks on identity and privacy. Each of the folks up here works and thinks about identity, each in different ways, but I think in ways that really complement each other. And I think that's coming together in a really amazing composable identity stack that is going to give Web3 developers some really powerful tools that really blow away anything that could be done with one solution on its own. And also anything that exists in Web 2. So I'm super excited about that and to see what it unlocks. I'll kick it off by just introducing myself briefly. I'm Danny Zuckerman. I've spent the last 4 years working on decentralized identity, most recently as one of the founders of 3Box Labs, along with Michael. And before that, co-authored a book on social identity. I'm seeing the panelists change faces here, and I'm going to have to step my game up a little bit. And yeah, I'll pass it off to you guys. Maybe I will kick it to Val first. Each of you guys want to spend about a minute introducing yourself, talking about what you work on and how that relates to the broader identity ecosystem.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danny. Yeah, super happy to be here. Hope you all can hear me okay. So yeah, I'm Val. I am one of the members of the 3Box Labs team. I'm a software engineer, mostly focused on infrastructure. And yeah, we are working on the ceramic network. So Michael just gave a presentation that kind of talked about some of the things that we're doing there, and also building IDX, which is our identity protocol.
Cool. And maybe Brian, I think everybody's seeing, unlike Zoom, the same order, so we can just go down the line here.
I wasn't sure if it's the same order. It's cool. Hey, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm the CEO and co-founder of RabbitHole. It's a platform to earn and learn for different crypto applications, mainly focused on kind of building this on-chain resume for different crypto individuals as they go down the crypto rabbit hole. Previously worked at Dapper Labs, working on their layer 1 flow and different dApps like Cheese Wizards, CryptoKitties, and so forth. So yeah, happy to be here.
I think it's my turn next. Hi guys, Alanna LaFerre, new last name. Last minute. I work at Consensys. I am the commercial lead for identity. I also am publisher of Decrypt, so 2 different things, all in the commercial realm. I come from the crypto/advertising space. I ran ad standards for a while. I came from traditional publishers as well as startups, and I'm steeped in identity and what we need, both in the world and in very specific verticals like media.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm from BrightID. We have a very laser-like focus on allowing people to prove to applications that they only exist once in the system. It's a very important, very specific problem. And yeah, happy to be here and talk about BrightID and anything else related to identity.
Hi, I'm supposedly Jarrad, CEO and co-founder of Status. I don't really have an active role in identity, but I advocate the position that creating systems that don't rely on identity is the way that the individual will ever have a self-sovereign identity. I think the path of starting any identity system is fraught with inherent challenges, and the technical advances of proposed self-sovereign identity systems that I've seen so far are unlikely to escape some of the pitfalls of present-day identity systems. I know my position is somewhat futile, as the kind of fetish for identity goes far back as like theocratic societies of the Bronze Age, showing this sort of desire for controlled mechanisms of identity formation through moral codes of conduct. And well, not much has really changed, really. I mean, just look at KYC or any big tech platform. or even mass identity rollout systems like India or China. So yeah, on the one hand, you can see that identity systems would be rolled out and how they're employed on mass scale. And then on the other hand, there's problems inherent in any identity system, even self-sovereign ones, such as normative conditioning, authentication, and access control, which leads to like the propensity for the need for a singular identity and worse, feature creep that moves any identity system outside of its original context. As it reaches wider adoption, it may even surpass the intentions of the creators' intentions. So yeah.
Okay, thanks all. So we can see we have a bunch of different viewpoints here represented. I guess I'll start by opening it up. Jarrad left us with some of the downsides of past identity systems and even some downsides to the potential of some self-sovereign systems that people are building here. I'd love to open it up and just hear how people are thinking about, and skipping ahead a little bit, but what are the biggest challenges that you each see really specifically? And what are the most promising things out there right now to address some of those challenges?
I guess I'll go silence. So I think one of the biggest challenges, and I think Jarrad addressed it kind of from a high level, is the notion of repeatability. How do you actually maintain state in an ID? How do you think about an ID system? Is it really just about creating that one ID to rule them all for each individual entity, or is it just a notion of a network of identifiers that can help with supply chain work? I think that's what folks have been working on. I know in the media space, the biggest question has always been, how do you tag content? I know Ceramic is thinking about things like that, but how do you tag content? How do you tag images? How do you own your own creation? And how do you follow it throughout the world? That still hasn't been solved at scale. And then, of course, there's a user question as well, which is separate and also linked to that. So I think that there's technology that's being worked on, like DIDs and VCs, with Veramo, the open source platform we're trying to push out that issues DIDs and VCs. But the underlying context and question of how do we solve all those problems has not been solved yet. But I think this group, this crypto universe, can help solve it.
So, I mean, I certainly lean towards self-sovereign identity systems that are kind of graph-based. But I mean, there are inherent issues with sort of networks of nodes due to the nature of like trust transitivity between those nodes and power laws. So, and that's not necessarily inherently bad, right? And nothing. I'm only raising concerns or questions or challenges. But what I see is this kind of a functional limitation built into that kind of paradigm, because you're going to end up having quote unquote super nodes that essentially have a sort of social capital or trust capital that accrues with them. And therefore there is a sort of practical limitation on how sovereign your identity is, because you're dependent on some of those claims, especially if I'll stop.
Yeah, so I think, Jarrad, what I'm hearing you talk about very generally is when you're in a decentralized and networked system, no matter how you design it, there might be ways that private information is leaking out and can be correlated. No matter how private you might actually make the data, are you actually practically able to design a system that that can't be observed in ways that maybe might be dangerous? And curious from other panelists who I know are quite concerned with privacy, and we've all heard some examples of both the catastrophes of how it's done today in Web 2 and with some more country-based identity systems that are more universal. You know, we all talk about the desire for interoperability and for decentralized and networked identity, but how do you see being able to protect privacy in different ways going forward?
Yeah, I'd love to chime in here. I think that oftentimes when we talk about identity, we think of it as like this kind of singular entity, like a single person has a single identity. And there's definitely use cases for that. And I know that like some of us here are working on use cases for that. And, you know, there's very good reasons that we want to have some like persistent and reliable identity that we can attach to a person in the real world. But I do think that also comes with limitations, like the ones that Jarrad is kind of speaking about. So like there's still need for anonymity. There's still need for being pseudonymous. And I think that we can't just constrain our concept of an identity to like one sole thing. Like it has to be, identity has to be flexible in nature, but it also has to be like fragmented in nature. So like I should be able to have a specific identity on a specific platform and choose to have a different type of identity that has different data associated to it on a different platform. If I don't have that ability, then that's where we land in these really bad spots where we are now, where it's like, you know, I don't have a fresh start for applications. So like this history that maybe I don't agree with, or I, for some reason, want to leave behind, it gets carried with me everywhere. But also we end up with like these kind of like super nodes, right? We end up with people who have established credibility in one area that doesn't necessarily translate to another area. Like maybe they shouldn't have established credibility on some other platform. So I think the fragmentation aspect of an identity is really, really key, in addition to like the decentralization aspects.
Adam, I'm curious for your take here, given you are really focused on a solution that might not be legal identity, but really does require just a single identity. How do you think about this challenge?
Yeah, right. So I think that bringing something like a social security number issued by a government online is really bad idea. And it's horrible that we've done that. I definitely agree that you want to avoid this unwanted linkage between all these different applications. You don't want to have an identifier that links you across a bunch of applications where you may not want to be linked. You probably don't want to be linked. So we totally need to avoid that. And I think we have the cryptographic Legos to be able to accomplish this. I don't think that we need to link people's identities together in different systems. And I think we can actually accomplish what we're trying to do with BrightID specifically, which is to allow you to prove that you're unique in a system. We can do this without having passing around an identifier that's going to link you between systems. And so we have to do that. We have to consider privacy first. We have the technology to be able to do this. So I think it's achievable. That's our thesis anyway with BrightID. We'll see. I mean, there's smart governments out there and corporations that are going to do things like take an anonymous social graph and try to overlay it with other de-anonymized social graphs and expose people that way. So we're always going to have to be on our toes. We're going to have to be constantly making breakthroughs. But I think it's a challenge that we need to address.
I mean, BrightID is a great a great system. I really like what you guys are doing there. I'm also a proponent of any sort of claims-based system, especially if it's using zero-knowledge proof to only selectively reveal one normalization or one sort of property of your identity, but only that and only the proof that you have that claim. I think that's a really great path forward. And especially if you extend it with sort of Vitalik's notion of, yes, I know this, or I know my private key, which means that you can, it means that if that person tries to share that particular proof, then the person they share it with will view it as potentially a fraudulent claim because obviously the sharer knows their private key. Anyway.
Brian, I'm curious for your view because you've written a lot on what we can do with reputation when we have good systems and good primitives for identity and data in Web3. And then you're also you're building an app, and you're building with a lot of these pieces that others are. How do you think about the ability to consume different pieces of data, and probably wanting to consume more data rather than less to make judgments on reputation and deliver a better experience, but while also protecting privacy?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think we're just at the breadth of it. I think we're one of the only applications in crypto right now that actually have like identity at like some meaningful scale. Like at a baseline, we take the transaction history to define the reputation of a user, and use our own subjective reputation system to kind of base kind of the value of that user in itself. And it's funny, we integrate with BrightID, and we're going to be integrating Ceramic as to different identity logos to guarantee that the user is unique, and also for the user to plug in to kind of have their different credentials. But we're definitely looking into sort of this privacy aspect, right? I think Balaji has a very interesting thesis on identity of just having like two forms of identity, one more of like a public-facing identity and one more of a pseudonymous identity. I think we're very much going to have that divergence kind of in the next 12 to 24 months here, where we have this public-facing identity that's getting a lot of opportunity for decentralized work. You kind of already see this with like retroactive airdrops. Like if you've received the uni airdrop or donated to Bitcoin grants, that kind of gives you some opportunity for token airdrop. So that kind of has a basis for reputation of like what kind of contributor you are to a crypto network. So we're kind of taking that one step further and saying, well, if you've done 10 to 12 tasks across these different crypto networks, that might entitle you to some future opportunity using that transaction history of your reputation layer. So there's going to be those benefits of having your public-facing identity, but the privacy aspect is kind of like a whole different ballgame. Something they'll have to kind of tackle in the past. So we're kind of focused on that public-facing identity at first, but yeah, definitely still thinking about how we can incorporate the privacy nature of this.
Yeah, so I think that's a great jumping off point. I'm curious to hear views from others. So if we can achieve a decentralized identity system that mitigates some of the challenges that Jarrad and others have called out, so let's put that as our goal, and we can come back to how that might happen. What does that enable that we haven't seen before, that the developers who are watching this might be able to build with, both for Web3 experiences that we haven't seen in our ecosystem yet, but also that might be better than what people are used to with kind of traditional web apps? What are you guys excited about this stack of technologies enabling? Go ahead, Adam.
Some of the things that got me into this space was the need for governance that can happen on a global scale, that can unite humanity and get us working together on problems. But we shouldn't have to bring in, that should just require us to assert that, hey, I'm a human being and I only exist once. I'm not here attacking your system with multiple accounts. And so once we have that basic piece, we can unlock all kinds of new forms of governance. A lot of the really interesting things that are coming out of the radical exchange movement are types of governance that work really well if you can. They kind of spread the voting power more fairly, but it really only works well if you can show that you're unique, if you can prove to the system that you're unique. So that's interesting. Also, all kinds of benefits that are accruing to humanity, that are basic rights of humanity, that you want to extend to every single person just based on your ability to raise your hand and show that you're here. We should be able to extend those. So I think that it takes a big chink out of the existing like nation state problematic structure that we have, this world of empires that we're built on, and allows us to turn more into this global system where we just don't need a lot of that stuff anymore. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the internet, and more particularly the kind of technologies that we're all developing here, they represent like a new domain of sovereignty to me. Not really different to sort of like international maritime law or something. But at the same time, we have this kind of like a balkanization of the internet, you know, where we're having attempts by nation state actors to try and translate their national boundaries into virtual space. You know, China is doing an amazing job at sort of digital nationalism. But, you know, this whole idea of self-sovereignty, you know, it can really be taken back to these sort of Lockean ideas and sort of human rights ideas. I guess what I find so compelling about these systems is that they have like these different sort of concepts of individual control over your private data, specifically being identity related. As I said before, the right to selectively reveal yourself, the capacity to choose where your data is stored, right? And that's really important when we're talking about centralized data silos and the data abuse issues that come with that. Yeah, and I guess the ability to provide what you need to provide to those who need to validate it without relying on any centralized intermediary who can then control your identity.
Yeah, I would say kind of taking off the last stuff that you said, for me, the really exciting thing is breaking down those silos. I think that a lot of innovation is restricted right now because we have a handful of companies basically that have access to all of our data, and you know it prevents a lot of innovation. And I think like that's kind of the challenge that we're up against, like in the Web3 ecosystem. To be frank, like we have to kind of find a way to be competitive. I think that like the products that we kind of bring to the table will like naturally and are naturally driving adoption. So oftentimes like people talk about, you know, adoption being kind of the big blockchain or Web3 like issue. I think that like today in 2021 now, we've gotten to a point where we see like, you know, that we can actually create real value in the space. So now it's really about like us kind of working together in order to make that realized. And I think that by creating these identity systems that are interoperable, so as we were mentioning, like, you know, integrating Ceramic IDX and BrightID, for example, like creating a system like that is just so powerful, because like that gives us kind of a fighting chance to like actually make Web3 a real thing. And I think like not only breaking down the silos, but like giving users control over the identity is like, it's helpful, because it's like, okay, yeah, we want like people to have the ability to like, you know, put things where they want them, revoke things if they want them. But even like broader than that, just like the education piece, like people don't really understand how any of this stuff works like in Web 2. Web 3, like the transparency that Web 3 gives you is like so powerful. So I'm really excited for users to now like have that control and start understanding like how do all these pieces fit together, and then like being able to like give us more feedback. Because if you don't have like enough information about the system, like how can you really say to someone like, yeah, this is working for me or this is not? Like we have such opaque kind of metrics that we use in Web 2 to determine if something is working. And I think like the really cool thing about identity in Web 3 is like now users can actually understand what they're doing and have more of a say. So that is also kind of like tying into the governance piece too. Like they can actually have a say in like what's happening, how these protocols are interacting, if this is good, like moving us forward in the direction that we want or not. So yeah, those are things that excite me about it.
Well, it also includes user education, because a lot of users, Web 2 is where data became the new oil, right? And it was locked off and taken away and monetized by large corporations for their benefit. And users didn't really know what was going on. They had no idea how valuable their own personal data was. And so I think it behooves all of us. I love, Val, what you said in regards to us all building together. We have to. Otherwise, we become the same thing that Web 2 was, which are these oil fields all on themselves. We can't do that. So to democratize the user experience and the user ownership of their data, we have to all work together to educate users as to why it's so important as well.
That's very well said. So lots of different viewpoints. I'm going to risk turning from lots of head nodding to some shaking, trying to summarize a little bit before this last question. It seems like despite different concerns and despite different focuses, everybody agrees that the information that is attached to identities, we all want that to be in a more shared and interoperable space than what we have in Web 2 today with these empires and oil fields. We want to make sure that that information can only be disclosed in certain situations. It's not easy to see or correlate by anyone. And so the concepts around selective disclosure and privacy are critical. That we simultaneously need to be able to make use of some of that information and the connections to do things like powerful reputations and proof of unique personhood so that we can actually govern and get great experiences out of these decentralized networks, while at the same time being able to represent ourselves in different ways. We have Jarrad here switching faces every few seconds to give us a demonstration of that in real time. So that's a lot to ask for. And these solutions, I think, are coming together now, and of course not complete, and there's still work to do. But if you're talking to a bunch of developers who are building things and maybe seeing these nascent solutions and thinking, maybe I'm just going to use keys, or maybe I'm just going to use user tables on my server, and kind of going the progressive decentralization route, what would you kind of advise them about how to think about identity early on in what they're building?
I mean, I would look into both India's Aadhaar system and China's social credit system, right? That is a really good sort of thing not to do, right? And you want to understand how those things come around, right? So what's so amazing or awe-inspiring is that like China's social credit system isn't really just normalizing a sort of moral code of conduct, but it's kind of a grand social sort of technical engineering, really, aimed to eliminate the untrustworthy elements in their society by very material system of rewards and punishments that has real world effects. So if you can avoid that, good stuff.
Yeah, I think starting from the building blocks, like thinking about DIDs, VCs, verified credentials, thinking about ways to build from the ground up. And I agree with you, Jarrad. I remember sitting in Brussels in front of European Parliament, and we talked about identity. And the first thing one of the MEPs said, oh, like China. I'm like, no, no, that's not what we're trying to build. So, again, I keep going back to the social responsibility piece, but it really behooves us as we build these things and as we build the building blocks, the Legos, if you will. Legos are painful if you step on them. So we have to be very careful on how we build these things. And again, we have to build them together. Otherwise, we're going to have things like China and other. But start small and then build up and learn from the mistakes that were made.
I really look forward to the identity wallets becoming like a normal thing, like it's something that everyone has. You have people are starting to get used to having wallets to hold their cryptocurrency. I really look forward to it being a normal thing and people being used to have a wallet, and love what Status is doing in this regard. You have and 3box, of course, and where you have a wallet that also contains things about your identity, just like a real wallet in real life. I think people understand that physical analog, and so I think if we can do it right, it can be something that's easy to use. And I think this could be the year, if not this year, next year, where we really start seeing user-friendly identity wallets and they start to really become a thing for people. So I really look forward to that. So if you start using things like 3box status, because those are gonna become big.
Thank you. Thanks for the endorsement.
Yeah, I think I would add to that, from the kind of like developer perspective, it's so much easier. It's so much easier than like rolling your own, auth and authorization, and just like repeating that code for every single app. That's such a pain. So using kind of just like client side authentication is like so easy. So that's one thing. But like more broadly about identity, I think it comes down to like the network effects aspect, right? It's like, it's hard to bootstrap a company. It's hard to start something new and to grow a network. Like based on the structures that we have in the industry and in society, it's just very difficult to do that. When you're tapped into Web3, you kind of get access to that network without having to pay that huge upfront cost. So I think that's like one major thing is like we kind of share in these network effects. We contribute to them, but we also get to share and benefit from them. And I think that's really exciting for new projects. And I think what it does is it kind of like pushes the boundaries for us. Again, like going back to what I said earlier about innovation, like it kind of forces us to be more creative about what value we're actually giving to users. It's not just like, hey, person who can raise the most money wins, right? It's like, no, you actually have to like create something that users care about, and give to the system, and the system will give back to you. So.
Cool. I think that is a great place to end. I think our time is just about up. I think we are the last panel of the week. Is that right, Jonathan?
That's correct.
All right, last panel. Woo!
Yeah. So thank you all. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.